So you want to start learning Japanese? Well, you will need a lot of magic and a lot of time to study everything, because the secret about Japanese is just studying a lot. But to make it a little bit easier, let's follow these tips. And I think my magic is running out already just by trying to talk about studying Japanese. Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Vonen, and if you're watching this video, it's probably because you want to start learning Japanese, but you don't really know where to begin. Because it's a very complicated language. If you look at text in Japanese, it's like, how do I even start with learning this? To make this video a little bit easier to watch, look in the corner, I will have all the chapters of this video. And there will be a timer going over them. Right now, you see that intro is slowly filling up, and when it's full, it goes to the next chapter. So, let's get started. So what do you need to learn to become somewhat fluent in Japanese? You have many different things that you need to learn compared to another language. For example, look at a textbook or at any Japanese related materials, or just walk in the streets of Japan and you will see a lot of strange characters. They have three writings. They have the kana, which exists out of hiragana and katakana. They have kanji as well. So those are the three main syllables, character groups. However you want to call them. So hiragana is for writing everything in Japanese. Katakana is meant for foreign words like terebi. And kanji is to make texts more readable, because they don't use spaces in Japanese. So using those characters, which each have their own meaning, which makes, if you look at the text in Japanese and you see those kanji, it makes the text more readable, because you can tell directly okay, there the word starts, there it ends. If you just have hiragana without spaces, good luck trying to decipher that one. So three writing systems you have to learn. Hiragana exists out of 46 characters, and katakana is basically hiragana but written differently, also 46 characters. And then we have kanji, and those, sadly enough, they don't have only 46 characters, but they have a couple thousands. To make it easy, just learn the 3000 most common ones and you'll be able to make sense of most texts, as long as you're not trying to read a newspaper. And then for words, how many words do you need to know to be able to have decent conversations and to read most materials? For this I will look to the GLPT test, because it's not a perfect test. The GLPT test is a Japanese language proficiency test, or in Japanese, Nihongo no Ryokushiken. It's by no means a perfect test, but it gives a good guideline of what to study next. So if you're stuck with studying what do I learn next? Look to the GLPT test, see at what level you are, and try to learn further. 3500 words is around the amount that you need for GLPT in 3. And I would say, starting from GLPT in 3, you basically know enough to read most materials, and you'll be able to learn Japanese in almost any way possible, in any way that you can think of. Listening to songs, watching television in Japanese, watching anime in Japanese if that's your thing, or manga, shousetsu, novels, Japanese novels. And then for grammar, although Japanese grammar is very different from English, it's a lot more complicated. And there are not that many rules. There are not that many grammar rules, but of course you need to know them. And to get, like I said, to get at the GLPT in 3 points, you need around 260 grammar rules. So we have 3000 kanji, 3500 words, and around 260 grammar rules. That's about the amount that you have to learn. For this, many people mainly focus on their goal. Their goal is watching anime in Japanese, so they only try to do things with anime to learn Japanese. Or some people want to listen to Japanese music, so they listen to only Japanese music to start to learn Japanese. I would honestly not recommend that. Learn Japanese in its entireness. If that's is that a word? Entireness. Apparently that's a word. I can't stress enough how important it is to know like the small details about Japanese as well when you actually want to become somewhat fluent or decent in speaking, reading, understanding Japanese. What I would recommend, however, is write your goal of what you want to achieve, like why are you learning Japanese. Write it on a piece of paper and put it on a place that you often go to, like your desk or next to your television or next to your bed, or if you're that kind of a person, on the toilet in front of you. Every time you take poo, you see your goal and you're like, that's why I learned Japanese. And now let's talk about having a schedule. Having a schedule to learn something as big as a language is really recommended. And I will give a couple of explanations of why you should have a schedule and keep to the schedule. Because if you don't, you will run out of motivation. Your motivation will go up, down, it will be a roller coaster. And if you have some kind of an idea of like, okay, at that week I want to achieve this, in this month I want to achieve this. Have a goal of like how many words, how many kanji, how much grammar do you want to learn in a single day, like, or a single week or a single month. Because everybody's busy. I'm also busy with work and some days I just cannot study as much as I want to. So instead of scheduling by day, I started scheduling by week. So in this week I want to learn this many words, this many kanji, and this much grammar. That's basically how I'm doing it now, because I just don't have the energy to study every single day. And if you try to keep on a daily schedule, on daily studying schedule, your motivation will go down on the days that you have too much to do. But try to keep to at least a weekly schedule. I won't recommend a monthly schedule. A weekly schedule is normally like doable, because most of the time you have 2 off days at work or 2 off days at school, so And then another important factor to make a schedule is how long do you want to take to learn Japanese. So a year has 52 weeks, but you can only use 51 weeks, because your first week, before you even start learning vocab or kanji, learn kana. It takes only a day to actually learn it, but practice it for like a full week, so it's really stuck in your mind, especially katakana. Hiragana, very easy, you will see it every day. Katakana on the other hand, you won't see it as often, so practice for the first week. If you want to keep your motivation up while studying, like being able to read everything fluently, learn hiragana, katakana for a week. Like learn it in one day and practice for the rest of the week. So your first week, kana dake. So you have 51 weeks left if you want to study Japanese in a year. Like you can do it in a longer term or in a short term. So for the sake of this video, we will say you take 1 year to study Japanese. So you have 51 weeks left, because the first week only kana. That means you have to learn around 70 words a week. So that's around 10 a day. And for kanji, learn around 60 or 70 if you feel very motivated. But I would recommend 60, like keep your amount low in a week, like what you will study. Because if you go too high, you will lose your motivation quickly, because you will suddenly wake up and look at your tool to study, like practice all the words, your SRS tool, and see, oh no, I have 1000 words to review today. And there's nothing more depressive than seeing that, because that day you'll probably be kind of busy, and you suddenly see like 1000 words to review, and you're like, okay. And the moment that you take a break from studying Japanese, like when you learn Japanese, your experience goes up and up. If you don't study for 1 week, it goes like this. Like learning like this, not learning like this. It goes down drastically. And for grammar rules, just to like 1 rule a day or 5 a week. Really depends on how much time you want to invest. But let's talk about studying tools, because now you know what to study, how much you have to study, but how will you actually be able to review it easily, learn it easily without too much wasting time. For this I would recommend Anki or Memrise. These two tools are SRS tools, means spaced repetition systems. What they basically do is creating a flashcard. So a flashcard is basically this. You have one side with a question on and the other side has the answer. What Memrise and Anki allow you to do is saving you money by not buying a lot of paper and basically wasting it. But they also help to make it review like spaced repetition system. So you learn it one day. If it's difficult to learn, the next day we will see it again. It gets easier to learn, so you will see it in like 2 days, 3 days. And that interval becomes bigger and bigger. Make a mistake, back to 0, you will see it the next day again, in 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, and so on. Anki is great, Memrise is great. You really have to choose your favorite. My favorite personally is Anki. A little bit difficult to get started in. I've made a deck if you want to find my deck for learning Japanese. Look in the description or press the explanation mark, it has a link to that video. For Memrise, however, I haven't tried, I tried making decks on Memrise to put all my words in that I've learned. But it does, it's not for me. The interface is supposed to be more user-friendly, but for me it has too many limitations for what I want to achieve. Everybody has a different study method, so please try them both and see which one suits you the most. There are also options like Quizlet, but I haven't looked into that one at all. But somebody asked me to review it. I may review it, but I'm kind of happy with Anki, and I'm planning on making a whole video about how to do Anki from start to finish, how to actually become good at using it. But that video is probably for next year. And with next year I mean in a month or 2 months. But now what? We have our schedule, we have our tool to use. But where do we get the words from? Where do we know what grammar to learn? Where do we find the kanji to learn? For this I will have a selection of websites and things that you can use. So let me name a couple of websites right now to study Japanese. So first website of course is Memrise. It's the one that I started using when I started using Japanese and when I started learning Japanese. If you go to courses, Japanese, and then you see Japanese 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When I started there were only 3 courses and there was not even a 0 one. So yeah, Memrise has been doing quite a good job in keeping up with the learning demands. Second one is Anki Decks. This is a place where you can find pre-made decks to learn anything from Arabic, Chinese, but what we are interested in is Japanese. So you can see Japanese basic hiragana, Japanese score 2000 words. There are so many things here. For kanji I would recommend the all-in-one kanji deck. It's a very good deck, link will also be in the description. I've used it in the beginning, and on Memrise you also have an Anki deck that I would also recommend, and it's called a 2136 Joyo Kanji by grades. The Joyo Kanji is not that similar to the GLPT, but the Joyo is more in the way that kids learn it at school here in Japan. Another great site, especially if you want to focus on studying grammar, is Bunpro. There is a 30-day free trial, and after that it's paid, but the cost is not that much, and it's actually quite a decent tool to study grammar in Japanese, because you learn the grammar by sentences, by using sentences. Another tool for learning kanji is Kanji Kohi. I haven't used it that much, but I've heard from other people it's a nice tool to use. Next up is JapanesePod101.com. They have a lot of videos, especially for beginners. Another site I found recently is Marshall's site, Master Japanese from Scratch for free. I've looked into it and it's actually kind of a decent resource. It's completely for free. They have a quiz as well. I recently found it because somebody that subscribed to my YouTube channel let me know about it. And of course we also have the site Taikim's Guide for Learning Japanese. It's a great guide, it's for free, and if you go through it, you basically know almost all the grammar that you will need. So be sure to look into that site as well, as it's quite a nice way to start getting into the grammar. Like if you really don't know what to go for, like which site to use for grammar, use Taikim's guide first, because it really explains everything in very easy ways, with examples, vocab that you can learn to use an example. Like it's a great resource, a great place to start learning Japanese grammar. There are also sites like italki. Basically, you buy points on italki and then you can talk, like have lessons from real Japanese people. I won't really recommend that because I've used it. I wasn't really happy with it, but maybe your experience will be better. But the moment that your Japanese gets a little bit too high, like lower intermediate, they don't really know how to handle those students, at least not for me. Most of the people that I had lessons from are mainly used to teaching very beginners. Another site that is soon coming out is Linguti. I have no idea how it will be because it's still in progress, so no, not really any information that I can give about it, except for it will be used to, like, it's a site to learn Japanese, Chinese and Korean, but I haven't been able to look at it yet because it's under construction. But maybe it will be a good resource, so I kind of want to include it. Maybe by the time that you watch this video it will be open. Another great site with a lot of information is imabi.net. It has a lot for like beginners, intermediate, advanced. It has a lot of lessons, and they're actively working on like reviewing everything to see if it's still correct and such. So really recommend it. Then a couple more practice sites. You have NHK Web Easy, very easy articles in Japanese. You also have News in Slow Japanese, which is personally one of my favorites. It's not that well known, but they also have a lot of articles. You can choose to listen to music in slow version or in a speedy version if you want to see, okay, can I still understand it if it's in normal speed. And of course you also have Wanikani to learn kanji. Wanikani is one of the more well-known, but yeah, it's paid, so that's why it's more at the bottom of the list. And don't forget about Reddit, because you have a lot of subreddits where people go to learn Japanese or like to talk about their experiences of learning Japanese. A link to one that I sometimes use will also be in the description. One of the sites that I started out with, Tanoshii Japanese. It's a very good site, and through that site I actually learned hiragana and katakana in just one day. Link to that video of how you can learn hiragana and katakana in one day will also be in the description. There's also this site with traditional Japanese children's stories. I will also include that one in the description because I think it's kind of a nice resource to have. It's just a couple of simple children's books, but only written in hiragana, so it's kind of good for beginners. And of course another great site to learn Japanese is YouTube, and I will soon talk about YouTubers that I would recommend to learn Japanese, but first we'll go to apps and books. After that we will discuss YouTubers to learn Japanese from. So next up, let's go over all the apps that I would recommend to study Japanese. First app, of course, Anki. I use Anki on my PC, I use it on my phone, and like if you don't want to download it, or like for whatever reason you cannot download it on your current PC, you can also use Anki on the internet. Second is Memrise. Memrise also has an app to use on your phone. I'm not a big fan of it. It's not that convenient to use, but yeah, most people like it, so yeah, give it a try. Maybe you'll like it. And then an app with a lot of information that I used so much in the beginning when I was studying Japanese is Ja Sensei. So Japanese Activator Sensei or something like. I don't really know what the Ja stands for. I thought it was Japan, but apparently it has a different meaning. But yeah, it's a great app with a lot of documentation about studying Japanese, learning Japanese. Like, yeah. Everything that you want to learn about Japanese is probably inside of the application. Next up is my favorite, like an application that's so great that I always say to people, like, it's a paid application but it's worth it. And that application is Human Japanese. They also have a level up, and that's called Human Japanese Intermediate. I have both of them, bought it in the beginning when I was starting to learn Japanese, and they are amazing. If you don't want to use Taikim's grammar guide, which you can also have on your phone, I would recommend Human Japanese. It's a great app with a lot of information in it. It also has like cultural notes, pronunciation, hiragana, katakana, you can also learn from it. In the intermediate version, they started introducing kanji. Kind of late to introduce kanji at that, like, yeah, in the second application. But it's a great application to get to know and get familiar with Japanese grammar. Next up is Lingodeer, and I have kind of a love-hate relationship with it. Like, I've made a video about it that it's that like you have to pay for it now and it's not that cheap. But on the other hand, you can learn Korean and Chinese and all other languages with it as well, and I still like the application. I got a premium subscription now, somebody gave it to me, so thank you for that, but without premium it's kind of it's kind of limiting to a certain point that you can go up to. I'm not sure what that point exactly is, because documentation also doesn't really say for what you actually pay. But Lingodeer, if you want to spend a little bit of money, go for Lingodeer. It's a great, it's kind of like Duolingo. And on that note, Duolingo, also a very good application to learn Japanese in the beginning. The moment that you get at lower intermediate level, Duolingo gets kind of, yeah. They're working on it, like the Japanese course is very recent, but it still needs quite some improvement. It's like what, yeah, I kind of expected it, because kanji is very complicated. Each kanji has so many different ways of pronouncing it, so many different meanings, so it was kind of to be expected that it would be kind of so-so in the first year. So, to begin with, it's a great application. Another great application, something that my friend uses in Belgium, he uses Drops to learn Japanese. It's basically something for vocab. It's quite a decent app to start studying Japanese. And then you have Japanese Kanji Study. This is more for kind of lower intermediate. It's kind of confusing to start with at first, from my experience. Maybe you'll find it more intuitive or more practical to use. Japanese Kanji Study. For me it's kind of, yeah, I like it, but it takes some time to get used to how things work. And then the book section. I like books, but to be honest, I cannot recommend that many books that are like publicly available. Like, I like the kind of books that you can have from Daiso, the 100 yen shops here in Japan, but yeah, traveling is not possible right now for you. So for you to come to Japan to buy those books at a 100 yen shop is kind of impossible, so I cannot really recommend them now. They have like these nice little books for like basic, like they're meant for kids in Japan to study basic words in Japanese, like animal names and such. I like them, they were great in the beginning, but you cannot get them here. If you ever come to Japan, go to Daiso or Seria and you will find those books. But yeah, so the number one is probably going to be Genki. Genki is just one of the standards in Japanese language schools as well to learn Japanese. They're great. If you want an easy way to like get into Japanese, use Genki. If you're however more on like the challenging side and you want to challenge yourself, get Mina no Nihongo. It's fully in Japanese, so it really forces you to start using Japanese very early on. But if you're the kind of person that easily gives up on things, don't start with Mina no Nihongo, because you will give up at least 5 times. And then my new discovered favorite for when you're kind of over beginner, the series that I would recommend is the Nihongo So Matome series. Like, I recently discovered those books. Well, I had them for some time, but I never really used them, but I started using them and they're amazing. The fact that everything is like, 6 weeks, and every week you learn, every day you learn a new thing, and so on until the book is finished in 6 weeks. Like, you also have the test books, and those are probably my favorites, kind of like for the GLPT. They're basically meant for GLPT takers. And you have those little test books. They're so great. Like, it tests you to see like if you actually know it. If you don't know it, you know on what point you need to work. Grammar, kanji, or vocab. Like, I love those books. Those are really my main recommendations the moment that you get over beginner level. If you get around intermediate, I would recommend Kanzen Master series. I have some of those books as well and they're great. But they're mainly in Japanese and they're not as intuitive to actually start learning from. It's more kind of like a review book or like an extra information book. So yeah, my recommendation will be start with Genki and then go to the Nihongo Somatome series. Next up, YouTube channels to learn Japanese from. I know this great channel, and what's his name again? Voilen's Live. Yeah, he has some great videos about the GLPT in 5 grammar and GLPT in 4 grammar. He also makes videos about helping you to learn Japanese. If you don't know what this channel's name is, it's my channel. Self-promoting, yeah. And another channel which is very popular is JapanesePod101.com. If you've been trying to learn Japanese, you will have seen this channel. They have so many videos. It's kind of messy to look through all the videos to find like the good ones, because they have so many. But yeah, just set it on autoplay whilst doing the dishes or something. Another channel that I used a lot in the beginning, but that I don't use that, like I don't really watch that channel anymore, is Japanese Amo with Misa. I started watching that channel in the beginning when I started learning Japanese, and yeah, she has very good videos. Another channel that I'm still subscribed to till today and still watch almost every videos of him is Chad Zimmerman. He doesn't really make like Japanese teaching videos, but he has a lot of videos like explaining ways to learn Japanese. He also has a lot of book reviews. If you're trying to find a new book, look at his channel. Another channel that's not that much about learning Japanese anymore, like he has some videos about learning Japanese, is Abroad in Japan. Mainly, it's kind of motivation for me. Like I see it as a motivation channel. If you're learning Japanese, you need to have some like motivation boost to keep going. So yeah, like when I feel like kind of unmotivated, I will start watching old videos of him, and I'll feel like, okay, like those are the kind of places I can still visit in Japan that are so interesting, and like it gives me more motivation to learn Japanese even harder, to actually be able to talk very fluently with native people and explore Japan without too much trouble. And then I have two more channels that I recently discovered, like some weeks, months ago, and that I watch regularly, are Learn Japanese with Mayo and Learning Japanese with Taka. They are two great YouTubers which really put a lot of effort into their videos to help you, like everybody, learn Japanese. And those are basically all the YouTube channels I would recommend, because I don't really watch that much YouTube, like not that much YouTube to learn Japanese. I'm kind of an IT guy, so I watch a lot of like IT channels. I have two IT channels that I would actually recommend you to watch. Like if you love IT, watch those channels. They're kind of funny and they upload very, very regularly. The first channel is Serorine. She's well, I think kind of a popular IT YouTuber here in Japan. And the second one is this channel. It has some DIY videos. I like his channel a lot, but I have no idea how to pronounce those kanji. And then for all your DIY fans here of making furniture by yourself, I have one Japanese channel. And his channel is basically called GP Channel. Very easy name, and yeah, he's kind of a fun guy to watch, and he also explains everything quite well of how to build, renovate things here in Japan. I like DIY, and when looking for DIY videos in Japanese, I found that. These three channels, those two IT channels and this one DIY channel, they're only in Japanese. Some of them have subtitles, some of their videos, but not all of them. So it's really meant for like listening practice if you already know some Japanese. So kind of low and intermediate, intermediate plus. And now, some advice on keeping motivation up. Try to find the kind of things that make you want to study Japanese even harder. For me, like when I don't feel like starting to study, I will usually start opening YouTube and just type in Japanese background music. And the moment I hear like Japanese background music, because I've probably heard all of them already, I get more into the mood from okay, up, go, let's study, let's study. And then the moment that I start, I can keep going, but it's the starting. The starting to do things is always the most difficult part, and that's for many people. But the moment you actually start, you find that it's more difficult to stop doing it. Like when I start studying, especially during my break at work, I was kind of like, oh, only 2 more minutes, like let's go. And yeah, like that, you need to find something that really motivates you, like thinking about your goal of why you want to study Japanese, but try to stack up certain things to like keep your motivation up. It's difficult, especially in the times that we are today. Like many people are getting kind of demotivated to do things because of this whole pandemic situation. And also sometimes you feel like, I'm not getting any progress, and like stop thinking that you make no progress. You only make no progress when you're not actually doing anything. Like the smallest things you learn in Japanese, like the smallest words, it is improvement. You're learning things. As long as you're learning it, like learning things, it doesn't matter what, and it has to do with Japanese, you're learning. You're making progress. It may not feel like it, but someday you will actually need the words that you learned, that you thought from these words are useless to know. Your motivation will change. Like I started studying Japanese mainly because like I liked Japan when I went here for the first time, and I wanted to be able to talk more to people. Then I of course met my now wife, and because of her I want to study even more Japanese, and now I'm basically just studying Japanese for her, but also because like I'm living in Japan. I want to talk with people in Japanese. I want to be able to go somewhere and start random conversations, like go to an izakaya and start conversations with people. Like I like talking. I talk a little bit too much, as I've heard from some of my colleagues. Yeah, sorry guys. Try to find friends that are also interested in studying Japanese, or try to find Japanese friends who want to talk to you in Japanese. It always helps to have some competition when you're trying to do something. Like you will always try that, just that little bit extra, because it feels like a competition, even though it's not a competition. Like learning a language should never be a competition, but it helps to make it feel a little bit like a competition. And then some advice, like how do you now actually like start learning and having conversations, and like how do you learn? Like these are all things you have to figure out for yourself. The biggest struggle for most people starting to learn Japanese is they don't know how they study. They don't know the study method that fits them. I told you, don't try to study too much at the same time, because like you have to keep reviewing it, and if your reviews get too high, it's kind of demotivating. So start slow and figure out what kind of study method works best for you. For me personally, it's just like forcing everything into my mind. If I make a mistake, write it down. Sometimes I write the same words 20, 30, 40 times a day, and it's still not stuck in my head, but I know that's my perfect way to study. I can remember much more if I do it like that, compared to just typing or just looking and pressing buttons or reading books. Like I need to write. Writing for me is my study method. That's why where is my book? I want to show my book. So I don't know what number of book this is that I'm using right now. Like I've been having so many books. Like these are some of the pages that I've been writing down. And I started writing very, very tiny. Like this book consists out of cubes, like tiny cubes. And Japanese people write in one, like you see the big outline and then the small outline inside of the cube. Japanese people mostly write inside of one tiny cube. So I'm trying to write like that, and that's not very easy. So some advice that I have for you is get a decent pen. Like I would recommend a sharp pencil, a mechanical pencil, because most pens just don't write fine enough. If you can find such a pen, good for you. Like I have this one and it writes quite nice. It's a 0.7. If I don't put too much pressure, I can write tiny with this, but it's not that easy. And so I have this sharp pencil, mechanical pencil. It's 0.5, and it has this thing. So every time when I press, something in here rotates, and you can kind of see it rotating. So the point always stays kind of like this, sharp, because every time when I write, it turns a bit. So it's always a sharp point, which allows me to write in tiny format. Invest in like kind of a decent mechanical pencil or something. So yeah, find the pen or mechanical pencil that you like to use, because if you write a lot while studying, you will notice that it's kind of a problem sometimes. Also, it's almost New Year and I don't know if you saw it in the background, but look, what a cutie! Like, if I can make it focus, yeah! Like, on New Year, everybody buys this kind of thing, or like even bigger. They put it next to their TV or something, like somewhere. And on New Year's Day, they open this up and there's kind of like mochi inside. Kind of like a very sticky rice cookie, like I don't know how, like it's basically smashed rice and it's very stretchy and sticky. I like it a lot, and I think the cow is plastic and I will probably keep the cow as decoration. Not sure if my wife will like that, but I decide decorations. So yeah, that's basically my guide on how to start learning Japanese. If I missed some things, or you have advice for other people starting to learn Japanese, or you want to share your own experiences of starting to learn Japanese, please put it down in the comments below. Check the description for all the links. If you like this video, if you find it useful, please like if you want to see more videos like this about learning Japanese or about Japan. And I hope you like this kind of like scheduling thing that took a long time to make. So see you guys all later, good luck studying Japanese, and I hope this video helped you to get started. See you all later, bye bye. Stay safe.